check this out. We have a simple web application that just takes our input. For example, it says enter your name. We enter our name, we click read, and it says hello, and then puts here your name. But what if I paste something special here and see this who am I? We can put this to be whatever we want to, but I'll leave it as who am I and click greet. And boom, we have remote code execution from simply entering a string. So how the hell did I do that? Well, I guess you have to find out. And maybe if you want to learn a bit more about this lesson, then check out my course, which is down in the description box below. It teaches you a lot of stuff about hacking, so maybe check it out. Also, if you want to buy my merch, then again, check out the link in the description down below. So here is the website that I've been talking about from the intro, and how it works is very simple. You enter your name, you click on the greet button, and it says hello, and it tells you your name. We can take a look at the code behind this web application, and as you can see from the syntax and the .py extension, we can understand that this is written in Python, and it's using Flask to handle all of the nasty business behind it. So basically host a web application on the local host. It has two routes. The first route just basically renders a template, home HTML, which we are seeing when we want to enter the name. And then the second route is the /greet, which is basically this route right over here, and which is responsible for handling how our name is rendered. So we can say test here, and obviously it will say test. And here is where, this kind of proves our point. As you can see, it tries to get the query parameter name from the URL, from the request, and save whatever the hell is within that name query parameter into the variable name. And if it's empty, it just says guessed. And then it checks whether these characters are within the variable name. And if they are, it says invalid input. And if it's not, if it's clean, it says hello. And it gives you, it enters here your name, and then it renders that as a template string. So we can enter our name and obviously click greet, and it gets displayed back to us. It's very simple. But I noticed something strange happening. So this is a template, which basically this is used by Jinja 2 to display certain stuff. For example, variables, or we can actually use this to, do math operations as well. So if you enter this somewhere on the website, on your bug bounty website that you're performing your research on, and click, the button or whatever, and you see 49, that means this website is vulnerable to server-side template injection. But you can just perform math operations at this point. So how can we escalate this to something further? Well, let me show you how you can walk up or even down the tree to get remote code execution. First things first, we're going to start with a number. And for example, whatever you have, whichever type of object or whatever in Python has its own class. For example, if we say dot underscore underscore class underscore underscore and click greet, we can see that this is a class of an integer. We can put a list here or an array. It will say, hey, this is a list. So everything within Python has its own class, let's say. For example, 1 is a class int. It's very simple and, it's understandable. But for us to get a remote code execution, we need something that will give us access to the globals, or in our case, the Python runtime internals. How can we get to that? Well, what's a subclass, or basically what's a base class of an int, since I said everything kind of has its own class? Well, it's class of object. So we need to get to that. So we need to walk down the tree and get to that. So we can see that if we enter, for example, a 1, we can get to the int class, but we now need to get to the object class. So how can we do it? Well, as I said, object is just a base class of an int. So what we can do here is very simple. We can just say dot underscore underscore base underscore underscore. And if we click, greet, we say, there we go, class object. Okay, so now it's about time that we check for the subclasses, which is, very important in this part of the stage. Remember that subclasses is a function that returns a list of subclasses. I hope that makes sense. So we can just say dot underscore underscore subclasses underscore underscore, and if we click greet, this is a built-in method, subclasses. Okay, let's call that function. And if we click greet, obviously, there you go, we have class type and we have all of this bull, but we can see a lot of classes. So can this all give us access to the, Python runtime internals? Well, yes, but you have to do a lot of digging to find which one of these classes will give you access to the globals. But I know for a fact one will, and it's a very odd and edge case behavior in Python if we just put here undefined. You can put undefined here, or put a variable which has not been defined. Simple as that. You can just put I don't know, you can put testing 1, 2, 2, for instance, whatever. And if we click greet, it will say empty. But if we just say dot underscore underscore init, which is, something fancy in the Python, I don't want it to confuse you, and click greet, you say this is a bound method undefined. See, what Jinja does essentially is when you enter something that doesn't exist, it won't crash the application. It will just basically show you nothing, like I've shown you. It just basically shows nothing. And this is why we have this special class, or special bound method undefined, that handles this quite well, and it doesn't crash. And this is what gives us access to the Python runtime internals. Okay, let's check this out. Verify by saying dot underscore underscore globals. And if we hit greet, we see, there you go. We have access to the globals from the bound, whatever the hell, undefined. So what can we do with this globals? Well, there is something called built-ins that we can access from this. And built-ins contain, if you scroll down a little bit more, they contain built-in function called underscore underscore import. And this function is, let's say, very evil in remote code execution, and it's obviously something that we're going to be using to have remote code execution. How can we get to it? Well, as you can see, this is from the built-ins. So let's, and the name of that is underscore underscore built-ins. So let's copy this up, and we can obviously go back. Let me zoom in again, and we can just say dot built-ins here, underscore underscore built-ins. And let's click greet. And as you can see, we have built-ins, and there is still a built-in function import. So let's copy this built-in function import, and let's just, again, say dot import. Again, this is what I've shown you, walking down the tree. And click greet, and obviously we now have a built-in function import. This is a function, as I've said, so we need to call it. But what can we pass to it? So we can maybe pass in the name of the module we want to import. For example, OS. So let's put OS here, and let's click greet. And there you go, we have the module OS, which has been imported. But it says frozen. So what does this mean? Nothing to be worried about. We can still have remote code execution quite well. Okay, so we have now imported the OS, so what can we do now? Well, we can have code execution. There is a nice little function within the import called popen, which runs commands for us, so popen, and we can put the name of the command. For example, who am I? And if we click, greet, yeah, we get this. So how can we know if this executed? Well, again, since we have imported the OS and we call the who am I, we can just say dot read, because again, this is just now Python code. Everything I have to this is just Python code. And we can just say, hey, dot read, and display me whatever the who am I function has, returned. And if we click greet, boom, desktop, blah, 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 / dead overflow. We have successfully called the who am I function, and AKA we have remote code execution. So here is how simple understanding of programming in Jinja 2 and Flask and whatever can get you to have remote code execution. And this vulnerability is called server-side template injections, or just, template injection. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay responsible, and as always, peace.